Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're undertaking a mission into, well, a pretty monumental piece of work. It's a document titled The Great Trek Reloaded.
It really is.
And this isn't just a political manifesto, or some standard 5-year plan. It's being presented as a detailed blueprint for South Africa's sovereign economic and institutional transformation.
The ambition is really what grabs you from page one.
Yeah.
I mean, the source material frames this whole thing not as a recovery plan, but as a deliberate sovereign mobilization.
Sovereign mobilization. What does that mean in practice?
It means the core idea is that South Africa, and really the whole continent, has to systematically reclaim its own agency, to move from being, just an exporter of raw materials.
To becoming the industrial choreographers of those same resources.
Exactly. You're not just selling this stuff, you're designing the entire value chain around it.
And the title itself is so evocative, The Great Trek Reloaded. It sets these huge historical stakes right away. The original Trek was about survival, settlement.
Right. But this reloaded trek is framed as a journey of industrialization, of dignity, and economic reclamation. And the source is very, very clear on one thing.
What's that?
This is about institutional choreography. It is explicitly not about the inflammatory politics of land seizure.
That's a critical distinction because it signals a shift in focus, doesn't it? The document argues South Africa is, and I'm quoting here, misrepresented, mismanaged, misled, but not broken.
Yeah, and that fixing it requires technical institutional reform, not just, more rhetoric. It's basically a manual for a whole new economic operating system, one that's owned and controlled by the nation.
So let's unpack that foundational problem. Where does this blueprint argue that South Africa fundamentally went wrong after the post-apartheid transition?
The central critique, and it's a powerful one, is that the nation focused way too heavily on land reform.
The visible stuff.
Precisely, the tangible things you can see. But it never successfully executed what the document calls ledger reform. And that, it argues, was the fatal flaw.
That is such a powerful distinction. Help us visualize this. Because land is tangible, you can see the farms, the fences. What do they mean by the ledger?
Think of the ledger as where the real power is hiding. It's invisible. It's the architecture of value. It's where mineral contracts get written, where futures are traded, where royalties are calculated.
Where all the little clauses are hidden in the fine print.
Exactly. And the blueprint argues that most post-independence African nations, they just inherited these colonial ledgers. They changed the names on the deeds, maybe, but they kept the destructive DNA of the accounting system.
And that DNA is defined by what logic?
The logic of extract, export, depend. You pull wealth out of the ground, you export it raw, and then you depend on global markets to tell you what it's worth and to sell you back the finished product.
So the whole point of this reloaded Trek is to correct that inheritance, to make sure South Africa controls the contract, the royalty, and the future, to control the ledger itself.
That's it in a nutshell.
Okay, so to solve a problem that big, you need a pretty radical solution. And this is where they bring in this 12-pillar framework. They call it the sovereign architecture.
Yes, and they don't see it as just for South Africa. It's framed as a continental operating system designed to institutionalize value creation by 2030. Each of the 12 pillars is a specific functional institution.
And each one is designed to perform a sovereign act that currently happens, offshore or controlled by somebody else.
That's the idea, to bring that power back home.
12 pillars sounds monumental. Is this just theory, or do they give concrete examples? Let's look at a couple. The commodity desk. What does that actually do?
Well, it tackles valuation head on. Right now, a ton of South African manganese is priced on the global market, right? Influenced by international buyers. The commodity desk changes that. It prices resources as sovereign instruments.
What does that mean, a sovereign instrument?
It means the price isn't just based on the cost of extraction. It has to include mandated value-added steps, technology transfer costs, guaranteed local beneficiation. It becomes a much higher value, strategically controlled asset before it's even sold.
So you're forcing the value chain upstream. And how does the benefit from that get back to the citizens? I'm guessing that's the sovereign dividends pillar.
You got it. The blueprint is extremely granular on this. That pillar makes sure that the returns and royalties, specifically from these new industrial corridors we'll talk about, are distributed back.
So it's almost like a localized, universal, basic dividend tied directly to how well the country's production is doing.
That's what the source implies. A structured system, especially for people living in those deployment zones.
And the key to all of this, especially in a country battling corruption, must be the audit logic pillar. How do they design that to prevent, leakage?
The audit logic is crucial. It's not just about compliance checks. It's about creating public intelligence. It forces total documentation, total transparency. Every contract, every resource deployment, every credential that gets minted is archived and tracked in real time.
So if the system is designed to institutionalize value,
The audit logic institutionalizes visibility, and visibility is the ultimate defense against corruption.
okay, we've got the system, the pillars. But a system needs fuel. Let's talk about South Africa's sovereign cargo. What are the specific materials they identify as instruments of power?
The plan points to 10 resources in two categories. First, you have the 8 strategic resources: platinum, manganese, chromium, vanadium, titanium, zirconium, rare earths, and phosphates.
So basically everything you need for the modern energy transition and high-tech manufacturing.
Pretty much. And then you have the other two:
The legacy anchors.
gold and diamonds, but they're reframed. They're not just commodities anymore. They're legacy anchors, cultural capital, diplomatic leverage. Their value is less about the immediate sale price and more about their use as, say, strategic reserves in complex global negotiations.
So the document is clear, South Africa has the resources. But crucially, it also argues it has the financial muscle. They list our 1.7 trillion in annual tax revenue, our 2.5 trillion in PIC assets,
The Public Investment Corporation, yeah.
and $60 billion in FX reserves. So the critique isn't a lack of money, it's a lack of sovereign choreography to deploy it.
That is the absolute key insight of the whole plan. The money is there. It's just sitting in legacy structures designed for passive management, not active industrial deployment. The blueprint details these actionable legislative levers to activate those funds.
Arguing that the country is capital rich but strategy poor.
Exactly.
And this is where it gets politically tricky. They talk about redirecting huge state assets, like using PIC funds for corridor financing. How do they justify that?
The argument is that the mandate of a state fund has to align with the sovereign mandate. The PIC manages assets for government employees, primarily. The proposal is to legislatively redefine what prudent investment means.
To include sovereign infrastructure that generates immediate, verifiable national returns, like these industrial corridors.
Exactly. And they don't stop there. They point to the immense capital locked up in funds like the UIF, the Unemployment Insurance Fund, and the compensation funds.
For our listeners, what are those?
They're huge social insurance pools.
Yeah.
Capital reserves built from employee and employer contributions for things like unemployment or workplace injury.
And they want to repurpose that capital.
The plan is to repurpose some of it. We're talking hundreds of billions of rands, specifically for trade school infrastructure and training facilities. It shifts them from being passive insurance funds to active instruments of human capital development. It's a radical move.
That leads us to one of the most fascinating ideas in the whole document: sovereign minting. Creating liquidity not just from borrowing, but from instruments backed by these newly choreographed assets, even human capital. How does that minting work?
It basically transforms resources from just stuff in the ground into financial architecture. So instead of just exporting platinum ore, you mint instruments like a platinum-backed hydrogen bond.
Or manganese-backed battery credits?
You're minting sovereign control over future value, and it extends beyond just minerals. The blueprint introduces credential minting.
Okay, you have to explain that. Credential minting.
The credentials issued through this new network of trade schools become verifiable, monetizable sovereign instruments.
Hold on. So my graduation certificate isn't just a piece of paper, it's an economic instrument.
Precisely. That credential immediately licenses a graduate for SME registration, gives them priority access to procurement tenders in the corridors, and acts as a verifiable marker of talent deployment on the sovereign ledger.
So it turns every trained artisan into a deployable economic asset. That's a direct answer to youth unemployment.
It's what they call the vindication arc for marginalized youth.
Yeah.
A clear, dignified pathway.
And what about existing debt? That's a huge drag on so many African economies.
It is. They propose structured debt for infrastructure exchanges. So, for example, a chunk of sovereign debt could be repaid to a creditor, but in exchange for that creditor, financing specific infrastructure upgrades.
Like building new energy grids, transport links, or
critically, the specialized trade schools themselves. It transforms a passive liability into an active deployment opportunity.
Let's look at that deployment on the ground. This whole strategy has to land somewhere. It hinges on these geographical deployment corridors. Where is this trek being mapped out?
The choreography is very specific, geographically and industrially. The corridors are the engines of the plan. So you take the Platinum Corridor in the Northwest. It's engineered to anchor specific industries. hydrogen production, medical manufacturing, advanced tech, and importantly, it's designed to strategically absorb the byproducts, palladium, rhodium-turning waste streams into new high-value industries.
Nothing is wasted. And what about the manganese corridor?
That's down in the Northern Cape. It's set up to anchor battery tech, specialized fertilizer production, and ecological restoration. And again, the logic is circular. It absorbs manganese byproducts like slag and oxides. Nothing is exported raw if it can be helped.
This links directly back to that human capital side, the credential absorption. If the Platinum Corridor needs 500 hydrogen welders, the trade school in Rustenburg has to function as a credential mint to produce them.
Exactly right. The supply chain gap literally becomes the curriculum. Sovereignty in this model isn't just declared, it has to be credentialed. The governance model ensures that your talent audit, or the technicians, matches your corridor performance audit. How much hydrogen are we producing?
So how is this massive national-scale choreography tracked and audited in real time? How is it protected from interference or leakage?
That is the whole job of the Sovereign Ledger. It's described as the Continental Choreography Engine. And it doesn't just manage the books. It provides public intelligence through specialized dashboards.
Sovereign dashboards. What kind of data points are we talking about?
4 key audits are tracked. Corridor performance. Is the corridor hitting its targets? Credential deployment. Are the graduates actually getting deployed? Dividend distribution. Is the citizen royalty being paid out? And treaty compliance. Are the contracts honoring the sovereign clauses?
So it turns raw data into an immediate political defense mechanism against failure or theft.
That's the idea.
A mobilization on this scale is bound to cause ripples across the continent. How does this continental echo get triggered?
The document suggests that South Africa's successful implementation acts as a sovereign mirror for its neighbors. It de-risks the strategy for everyone else.
So for instance,
the alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, would suddenly have a powerful partner in resource modeling. Or Namibia and Zimbabwe could accelerate their own lithium and hydrogen corridor plans, but in alignment with the SA model. The end goal is to get the African Union and AfCFTA to formally integrate this framework into pan-continental policy.
okay, now for the global chess game. How does the blueprint plan to handle the reactions from major players? The US, the EU, China, who rely on the current supply chains.
The strategy isn't isolation. It's negotiation from a position of real leverage. Within BRICS, the plan is to reposition South Africa as a sovereign anchor, centralizing the management of these new mineral-backed instruments. That gives it immediate institutional clout.
And with the Western actors who desperately need these minerals for their own green transitions.
There, South Africa uses its resource-leveraged platinum for hydrogen with the EU, manganese for batteries with China, to mandate the insertion of specific sovereign clauses into every single contract. And these are presented as non-negotiable.
What would one of those clauses look like in a legal document?
They'd include things like beneficiation floors, meaning a minimum percentage of processing must happen onshore, SME ladders, mandating that a percentage of subcontracts go to local credentialed businesses, and crucially, built-in technology transfer requirements.
They give a specific example for rare earth elements, don't they?
They do. The plan would trigger a renegotiation of existing deals to require the building of onshore separation capacity and mandatory IP retention clauses. So the global partner provides the tech, but the knowledge, the IP, remains a sovereign asset.
It's just a meticulous attempt to institutionalize value, to move resources from being a geopolitical curse to an economic covenant, all through detailed choreography.
And that leads to the ultimate point of the entire document, which is to redefine governance itself. The plan argues that governance has to evolve from just being reactive management, always fighting the last fire.
What they call sovereign rehearsal.
Sovereign rehearsal.
What does that actually entail?
It means you actively stress test the future. They propose using tools like AI treaty simulation labs to model corruption scenarios or international treaty loopholes before you sign anything. They also advocate for sovereign media, a dedicated documentation body to syndicate performance and document compliance, making governance itself a form of public accountability.
It's a monumental attempt to control the economic future and, fascinatingly, the national narrative itself. The plan actually defines memory as infrastructure.
It does, arguing that audit logic transforms historical memory into public intelligence, and that authorship writing a blueprint like this institutionalizes narrative control.
Which leaves you with a pretty provocative question. What does it mean for a country to institutionalize its own historical memory and narrative as a primary political defense mechanism? That's definitely something to mull over long after this deep dive is complete.
Indeed, it means your history isn't just in an archive somewhere. It becomes a live, deployable political asset used to enforce accountability today and defend sovereignty tomorrow.
A truly fascinating blueprint for the future of continental agency. Thank you for guiding us through this.
It was a pleasure.